It's a beautiful spring morning in the quiet countryside of County Durham, in the northeast of England. On a hill overlooking the gorgeous countryside sits Pockerley Old Hall. The new hall was built in the late 1700s and it's now a bustling hub of a home. In the kitchen, the maid is making bread for the family. She doesn't need to follow a recipe. It's a job she has done every day since she came to work at the house as a teenager. Down at home farm, the farmer is preparing a field for the crop of Swedes that will be planted soon. It's now Victorian times, but farming is still back-breaking work. In a time before tractors, the farmer relies on his workhorses and his own skill and experience to get the job done. Of course, none of this is real, but this is how life used to be in the northeast of England in the past. This is Beamish, the living museum of the north. Visitors come here to see how people used to live, eat, travel and work in the period from the 1820s to the early 1900s. Situated close to the city of Newcastle, Beamish is one of the most popular museums in the UK, with close to 500,000 visitors every year. And the museum's success is not exceptional. In modern times, there seems to be something of a resurgence in interest in how we used to live. Living history museums and carefully preserved ancestral homes are increasingly popular destinations for people to visit. So why do we seem more interested in seeing how people used to live than how they live now? Why are we so interested in the past?
It's our heritage, it's where we come from. I live in a really old city, I live in Edinburgh in Scotland, and the history's everywhere. You walk down every street and it's full of old buildings and you imagine who might have lived there, 100 years ago, who stood where you were standing now.
I think some people probably might not have been interested in finding out about their past and their heritage, but then they might be drawn to it because they fall in love with a book or a movie or a TV show that they're really interested in, and that sort of triggers some interest.
Nearly everyone agrees that we have a lot to learn from the past. But do they agree that in the modern age, it is still important to keep the old skills alive?
Definitely. I believe so. I think we need a little bit of the past to mingle a little bit with our present. Too much of, I think if we got rid of it, then we would just lose who we are.
I think old skills in terms of cooking and baking will always be important in day-to-day life, but plowing with horses and knitting may not be as important. I think it's a great skill to have, but given modernization of technology and mass production of things, I think many of those skills are probably going to go by the wayside into the future.
At the Beamish Museum, the staff work to provide their visitors with the most authentic historical experience possible. The museum opened in 1972, but work started on the collection long before that. In the late 1950s, the old customs and traditions of the Northeast were starting to die out as industry in the region declined. The communities that used to serve the collieries, shipyards and farms were disappearing, and with them the old way of life was being lost. A project started to collect things from the past. Anything and everything that used to be part of everyday life. The people of the region gave generously. Thousands and thousands of objects from kitchenware to steam engines. And these all became part of the recreation of the vanished communities at Beamish. Today, at the centre of the 300-acre site is the recreation of a town from the turn of the century. The town is complete with homes, shops where you can buy handmade sweets, and even a local dentist. Visitors travel around the site on beautifully restored trams. They can visit Pockley Old Hall to see how life was lived by the local landowner, his family and staff. And they can visit a colliery village from 1913 and see the cramped workers' terraces where women used to bake bread in communal ovens behind their houses. They can also see the local school where the boys and girls were educated separately, and the tiny pit ponies who used to work down the mines. Visitors can even get an authentic taste of the past from this takeaway where the cooking is still done with coal fires, just like it used to be. And the fish and chips are just as popular and delicious as they have always been. And more than just a museum, Beamish has become an invaluable educational resource. As well as offering its visitors a glimpse into how life used to be lived, it helps to preserve and pass on old skills through a range of short courses. The old ways are all brought to life by the costumed demonstrators who work at the museum. It's their job to interact with the visitors, to provide insight and explanations of the world around them. Visitors range from primary school children to the elderly, and their reactions to the experience can be very different. Sonia works as a maid at Pockley Old Hall. So what do the older visitors find interesting when they come to see her in the kitchen?
Really, they're interested in the things that they can remember from their childhood or from their grandmother's house. So it's, oh, I used to have one of those, or I can remember when we used to use this. You know, a lot of things, although we're set in the 1820s, a lot of things carried on until early last century. So things, you know, if things weren't broke, you didn't replace them. So things went from generation to generation to generation.
And how is this different from her younger visitors?
The children, when they come, they're absolutely amazed by the fire. A lot of them have never seen a real fire before. Some of them are actually quite reticent. They don't really want to go too near it because obviously they've been told, stay away from fire.
Sonia learned her baking skills the traditional way. And after working at Beamish for many years, she is used to her life as an 1820s maid. And there are few things in the modern world that she couldn't live without.
Well, the skills that I'm using today are skills that have been passed on from mother to daughter through generations. So I'm just doing what my mother used to do and what my grandmother used to do. I think I could pretty much live without everything that we take for granted today. But the one thing I think I couldn't really live without is international travel. The ability to move from one country to another with such ease, I think, is very underrated.
The author L.P. Hartley once wrote that the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. At the Beamish Museum, they make visiting this foreign country as enjoyable as possible. But they also help to keep it easily accessible to every generation.